You've got to absorb interesting information. You've got to become an interesting person. You can't just sit somewhere and expect people to give things to you. Alright, I've got a lot to unpack in this video, so I want to kind of give a bit of backstory first. I wasn't necessarily an introverted person as a young child, but since 2020, I think I definitely would have considered myself a bit more introverted. And I think for a lot of introverts, because we don't necessarily see the characters being portrayed in movies or books, or the people that we look up to being introverted, it kind of makes it seem like those introverted qualities are like bad things, and they're not necessarily bad. It's just that we often feel uncomfortable expressing those qualities. And the problem with that is people become friends with someone that you've made up rather than who you actually are. So you need to become comfortable in not necessarily like the very, very introverted part of the spectrum, but you need to find a midway. When I was more introverted, or at least had a lack of social skills, I thought that I needed to be having more conversations and having more exciting conversations with people, when really it's not the quantity of conversations you're having, but more the quality of conversations, and that's very important. When you have these questions as an introvert and you're kind of like in your own world, try to like ask those questions to the room. Ask anyone who's there what they think about something, and they probably won't care too much, and you can get a conversation going from there. But I think another important thing as an introvert, as someone with the lack of social skills, you need to learn how to like read a room. You need to learn how to use your own body language, use your eyebrows when you're speaking, use different tonalities in your voice, and that alone will make you a more interesting person. By reflecting more open body language, you start to have like a higher sense of self-esteem in who you are as a person, how you express yourself. If you can't just hold like basic open body language, you are gonna essentially struggle in conversations, because the way that you hold yourself does have an impact on how you feel and how you then express those feelings. So just put some time into learning how to use body language to your advantage and how to read body language, because that will really start to help you understand the room better and start to get deeper conversations, get better quality conversations. Because honestly, I think it's possible to have a good conversation with pretty much anybody, and you can't just expect them to open up straight away. You've got to open up first, and you've got to kind of ask a question that they might not expect in like a regular conversation. Open yourself up, start to express yourself as an individual, rather than trying to emulate something that someone else does or that you think is an extroverted quality. Just bring up a question or something that you've actually been genuinely thinking about, and if you're actually interested in that thing, the person will sense that, and then they can reciprocate with something that they're interested in, and that way you can actually have like a high quality conversation. The second thing as an introvert is that you might come across as like not an interesting person. And honestly, when you see someone sitting by themselves with their head down, doing their own thing, or just being in their own world and not talking to anyone, even if there's like a whole group around them talking, you won't necessarily feel drawn to talking to that person. So there's some like simple, like I was saying earlier, body language things that you can do to start to make your likelihood of having good conversations a lot higher. And there's not really any point in just emulating those body language techniques if you haven't actually got like an open, interesting character yourself. So start building your character, start doing some kind of like self-improvement things, start actually doing things that you know you should have been doing, start becoming more disciplined, start going to the gym, start reading interesting books, start listening to interesting podcasts, things that will actually grow you as a person and not just entertain you. Because if you just entertain yourself all the time, when you're in a conversation, you'll be trying to see what you can get from people rather than what you can give to them. And that's never going to get you anywhere. You can't just sit at a table with a whole bunch of people and expect them to start giving you interesting information and start having interesting conversations with you if you're not willing to give something first. So you need to understand, for you to have an interesting conversation and have a good quality conversation, you've got to absorb interesting information. You've got to become an interesting person. You can't just sit somewhere and expect people to give things to you. There's this reciprocity principle in psychology where you give something to someone and then you can expect more than that back from them. If you can imagine a quadrant with like introversion, extroversion, confidence, and diffident, you would probably kind of imagine that if you're an introvert, you have a lack of confidence, you're diffident, and if you're extrovert, you have a lot of confidence. But the fact is, a lot of people who like express these extroverted qualities are actually insecure and therefore are actually diffident and not actually confident in who they are. So by building your confidence, even if you have a lack of social skills or are introverted, you then start to move along the scale and you start to become an interesting person. Because in a one-to-one situation, someone who's extroverted and talks all the time will actually be perceived less interesting than someone who doesn't talk so much but asks good questions and gets you to open up. You'll then see that person as more interesting. So you've got to start asking questions to the other person, not trying to wait for them to say something interesting to you, and bring that quality that is yourself as a person to the table, and make sure that that quality is actually going to lead the conversation somewhere. And by being an interesting person, like I was saying earlier, you can then start to have better conversations with people. But basically, when you start doing things that you know you should have been doing, when you know that you should have started that diet a long time ago, when you start that diet, when you know that you should have been going to the gym and you start going to the gym, you then start to feel like a better person because you know you're doing what you should be doing. And that way you can then start to have more confidence and more self-esteem. But don't make it like a whole self-centered thing about what you can get. You need to then start giving those things to other people, because people will start to appreciate you as a person if you can then bring those interesting qualities in a conversation and start to be different than everyone else. If you're just copying what everyone else is doing because they're all extroverted, you will then just become like one in the mush and you won't actually have a unique personality. So start exploring different things, gaining information, knowledge, and start doing things that you know you should have been doing to then become a more interesting person, which will then lead to an increase in confidence. The root of the problem is actually a lack of confidence, and it doesn't matter whether you are introverted or extroverted. Once you have that confidence, you can then start to give things to people, and that will in turn make them more attracted to you. Thank you so much for watching until the end. I really appreciate it. I'll see you next week.